Hello, and welcome to the HR People Pod, the CIPD's fortnightly podcast, bringing you the topical stories and expert insights on issues impacting the people profession and the world of work. I'm Holly Ivins, the Reference Content Manager at the CIPD, and joining me in the studio we have...
Hello, I'm Jane Emma Peerless. I am the Chief People Officer of Caxton Group, which specialises in travel, professional services and foreign exchange.
Lovely, thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob. I'm currently the head of people at a building services organisation called Dowds.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me along. Matt Elliott, I'm the Chief People Officer at the Bank of Ireland.
Lovely, thank you. Welcome all. Thank you all for joining us. So before we get into our conversation, let's get to know everybody a little bit more. What's caught your attention in the last week or so? Anything you've been reading or watching that you'd recommend?
What, apart from Traitors?
Apart from Traitors. That was going to be my one.
Isn't Celebrity Traitors actually got proper celebrities in?
Yes.
It is incredible.
I have used the word flabbergasted more than I ever thought I would in the last week.
So I'm not watching Traitors. Is that a scandalous thing to say? I'm out of the habit of watching TV altogether. Definitely find myself reading a lot more nowadays, reading newspapers a lot more than I used to. I'm an obsessive cycling fan, but I can't watch that on the TV anymore since Eurosport went, right? So it's all about reading now. And I listen to music a lot, particularly when I'm on the move with work. So here's my eclectic one for you this week, because I listen to weird things. The range is incredible. And I found myself listening this week to Fame, the soundtrack of Fame.
Wonderful.
I don't know how that's happened, but that's where I've ended up. So on the way here this morning, I was listening to the Fame soundtrack.
Love it.
I'm that old.
It's your algorithm, Matt. Your algorithm has made Spotify put it up there.
Yeah.
Rob, Jane, anything you've been reading you'd recommend?
I'm currently reading a very good book called Never Split the Difference.
Okay.
And it's about negotiation. And it is written by an ex-FBI hostage negotiator. And I think negotiation is a very key and essential skill for any leader. I think it's particularly poorly represented. And it really upends all the prevailing thinking around negotiation that we have, particularly around the whole idea of getting to yes. He just shoots a bullet through everything, literally. And it's brilliant. So I would recommend that one.
So a quick note before we get going on our discussion. For everything that we discussed today, we'll be talking about general principles. As experienced professionals, you all know that it's difficult to know what's going on behind the scenes. So we'll be taking these stories as a jumping off point for our discussions. So first off, we're going to look at the story of wage growth in the UK. Fresh figures from the ONS show that average wage growth has slowed to 4.7% in the 3 months to August. We know cost of living pressures are still causing issues for people, and of course businesses themselves are not immune to these pressures. But what can employers do to keep employee loyalty high if they can't promise meaningful wage hikes?
There's a lot in that, isn't there? Let me just speak to the numbers first, because I thought this was interesting. And I think, obviously, we know that we can highlight that nominal wages do appear to be slowing in their increases, and that real wage growth is obviously very low. But, I thought it was interesting that, in fact, with private sector, which I represent, and actually was a large percentage of the businesses in the UK, it's slowed even more. I think it's 2.4%. So clearly there's a concern there. Having said that, when you look at the pre-pandemic levels, certainly between 2010 and 2019, actually average weekly wages only really increased minimally across those 9 years. I think they reckon it was something like £16. And the average annual pay increase was around 2.2%. So there is a possibility that it's not really indicating anything too negative. We're just normalising, getting back to kind of pre-pandemic levels. What I think is more concerning is the unemployment rate, and within that 4.8%, the 18 to 24-year-olds actually their unemployment rate is 12%. And I think that is the highest since the lockdown. So I think that speaks to the pressure that private companies particularly are under with the increased hike in national insurance and the increase in minimum wage, and are having to really forego maybe some of the hiring they might have done with new workers coming in.
And so what do we think about the kind of impact of this on employee value propositions and retention strategies?
I think very much it goes beyond the pay packet. It goes beyond very much who is within the business, because I think it very much is that external view of that 12%. How are we engaging those people in the world of work? How are we talking a story that you can do really valuable, really interesting work? How do we connect that message as an organisation? And how do we also as an organisation find them? Unemployment is an all-time low. I operate primarily in London and in Northern Ireland, where the labour market is so tight. I think I listened to this podcast with somebody else called it "You Can't Just Post and Hope Anymore," because an 18 to 24-year-old is not looking at Indeed or LinkedIn or any of these ways that we advertise opportunities to come into the world of work. How do we tell the story of the great work that's available to them specifically? I think that's my first point. And then my second point is really, as an organisation, once that talent arrives, is how do we build an experience, an employee experience that starts right from the beginning, that hooks them, that drives them, and they can see through their own eyes what a career looks like. And I think our job as HR professionals is to paint that picture very much, and whether that includes pay and it includes benefits, but also includes, do you know what, you've got a manager who is really going to mentor you, like I did. I am only sat here because of a manager like that. How am I going to help you to have a great work-life balance? But how am I going to get you to do work that's interesting to you?
Actually, the question as to, well, what's beyond wages is really what we should be attending to day in, day out anyway. So I think wages are always going to be critical for employees. It's the heart of the relationship as to providing your time and your labour in return for, a fair deal. But we've all been working for many years to develop a more meaningful relationship than that. And that's obviously the goal. And by doing so, we create competitive advantage for whatever our organisation is trying to do. I mean, that's how I view it. And so I think there are many dynamics that are coming through here. If we believe data around younger people and generations that are maybe coming through, they have different expectations of work. Let's see as that unfolds over the coming decades. But if there is a relative less importance around pay and possibly more importance around flexibility or feeling there's a real purpose at work, and as we talked about before, connection. And I've really felt that difference in recent years. I think there is an appetite from the workforce, and obviously I then talk and think particularly about my own, but I think there is a particular appetite to be connected with people at work and your employer, particularly at a time of disconnection, whether it be through our online experiences, the whole stuff about being connected but actually not in a meaningful way. And where do you get that human interaction, and where do you get it consistently now in life? It's increasingly at work. And so I think actually we've got an amazing opportunity to create this stronger relationship. And that's what we need to do, and that's what has to come through beyond pay. Just one example, actually, the Bank of Ireland, we opened up a private Instagram account. So it's just on Instagram, sorry, but we only let colleagues in. And it's just around well-being. And we started this a few years ago. I thought we'd have a few hundred people sort of get involved in that. We've got around 10,000 people in the whole organisation. And today we've got 3,700 people who are participating with that. It's just around well-being. So I think that's a sign of the appetite of how colleagues' expectations of organisations are changing, and actually what they will engage with. So yes, pay essential, but actually there's so much more to go for there. And the final point would always be around learning. I think we all need our organisations to be able to learn. I know we'll talk more about that today, but colleagues want that. I think they realise that over a career, they're going to need to continue to learn. The world is ever changing. The needs on all of us are ever changing.
Yeah.
And the best way to keep up with that is to keep learning.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think people will put up with quite a lot of discomfort as long as they know they are learning and growing. And there is a question around, actually, is there a point at which there is a fracture in the relationship between the employer and the employee in terms of, well, am I being paid enough to, can I live on what I'm earning? But there is also an economic reality with most businesses. And that is forcing companies to be much more honest with people about what the situation actually is. We were talking earlier, and I was using the example of a Jaguar Land Rover who have just undergone the most horrific cyber attack and have been put on hold. Their business has been put on hold for months and months now. And the impact that it's had on the medium and small businesses, expert businesses who are supplying them, they just don't have the bandwidth financially to be able to survive months and months and months without work, and the impact that's having on their employees. And this is what I think we're going to see now, because since the pandemic, businesses, particularly privately owned businesses, haven't had the ability to catch up and build up those reserves that they had before the pandemic. So we are all now forced in a situation where we are having to be more honest with our staff about the situations, about the likelihood of salary increases, what that looks like. Speaking to Matt's point, it speaks to the opportunities that exist for career development, for training, for what that career pathway might look like, and being really open about what's possible and what's not possible. And I think if you have that openness and that very strong communication, which works both ways, then people are very willing to go along that ride with you.
To have those honest conversations, to have those deep and meaningful conversations, let's call them, you need that connection. The 18 to 24-year-olds don't know what they don't know. And that's why it's really important for us when it comes to learning, when it comes to bringing new talent in, and it comes with things like apprenticeships, things like graduate programs. How are they built? How do they evolve? They've been around for decades. But how do we foster the connection with our biggest opportunity for labour? How do we build that connection? And I think it's really important that connection exists, because they don't know what they don't know, and they need a strong manager or strong mentor, whatever you want to call it, to help them show up and really be successful. And I think that builds.
I think if we're talking about being open and having a two-way conversation and rethinking values, perhaps, do we think it's a case of rethinking what loyalty could look like? If we know that there was a figure about 1 in 5 people have 2 jobs, is that just a reality going forward? And is it something that HR should be facilitating rather than policing? And do we think it's just part of that open and honest conversation?
Cracking question. Well, what is loyalty in 2025? I mean, we probably still remember a time when actually it was normal for people to be working 20 years for an organisation plus. I think if you're getting 2 to 3, you're doing well these days. The need to build financial resilience probably comes before loyalty in most people's worlds these days.
So this may be controversial here. Don't see that I should or HR should expect loyalty. I think it might be an outdated idea. So to the point as to multiple jobs, I think that's just realistic. I think it's always been the case. And practically at my organisation, we just ask that we would know, because we appreciate there'll be some people who will. And in many ways, we encourage it. We encourage people to take interest in local politics, in athletics from a pretty serious standard perspective, in volunteering. I'm an editor for a charity, why can I do that but somebody can't do something else, as long as we're aware of it and the overall working effort is safe in terms of working hours, etc. And then you come back to the loyalty point. Now, by the way, I would hope that we'd create opportunities in a career for people that actually that's not something that they do want to do. Okay, and there's obviously a balance to life that's really important too. But I do respect there'll be times when people maybe want to earn some more money. I think we should just be creating a great experience, and if it works for someone, brilliant, we've hit the target. But if somebody else offers something that's better, it's better. And why wouldn't they go? And I don't see that that's disloyal.
So moving on, when we're talking about loyalty, people staying, youth entering, we've also had the IMF recently suggested that Western governments may need to raise retirement ages to help keep public debt under control. A big statement, and one that could have serious ripple effects for employees and employers alike. A separate report from Longevity Centra warned that the UK may need to raise the state pension age to 71 by 2050, which is about 5 years higher than the current average retirement age of UK workers. So we could be looking at a future where organisations are supporting employees well into their 60s and even beyond. So what do we think this means for organisations about supporting employees through a longer term career path? What does this mean for a talent pipeline? I've used the word again, but how do we think HR should be preparing for this future of our workforce?
There are different issues in here, aren't there? One is just around paying for pensions as a state for the population of this country, and in same is true in any country. And then the other element is, of course, we are all living longer. We've got more to offer. So again, we should be testing our previous ideas of what a working life look like. I also think there's a really positive shift, because if I reflect on when I started, and maybe I'm getting a bit more ambitious for people who are towards the end of their career as I get towards the end of my career. Okay, but when I started, for sure, the age legislation was being changed in the UK. And the mindset in the organisation I was in at the time, and I was only a couple of years in, was very much this was a bad thing. We need people who are at the farther end of their career to just stop because they're not effective. The belief was that they were not effective. Doesn't cross my mind now, it hasn't done for a very long time, but that was in the late 90s, the viewpoint in the organisation I was in. Okay. And I think that was probably fairly widespread. So lots has changed, and lots has changed for the good around this. There's obviously a government policy element around pensions that feels like it's not quite ever addressed. So therefore, I think we'll see the age continue to go up. I mean, that's the only thing that ultimately you can do without a different kind of intervention. And as I say, in lots of ways, for me, I welcome that. I think we should be very open to it. What can we do? I mean, fundamentally, I think it comes down to skills and regenerating around skills. It's a path we should be on, thinking about technology impact coming. We've not mentioned Gen AI yet, which is brilliant. Right, but I've now done it. So, however this works through, we're clearly in a really pivotal moment in that regard. That will affect employment. It will affect employers, and so there are different reasons for getting to skills regeneration. And certainly, in my organisation, we've got there because we need to make sure we've got the skills that we know we need in the future more of before we need them, and that's the only way that we can keep up with customers. And so, I think customer appetite always leads you the right way. So yeah, for lots of reasons, skills development, I think, is the core of how organisations should respond to this.
So I guess, are we thinking that we can, rather than look at this as a challenge, can we make it an opportunity? Rob, what do you think?
I think it's definitely an opportunity. There's a similar theme coming out here between second jobs, side hustles, but there's also a second career. How many people do I know, I can't count them on both hands, who have had very professional jobs, like flying planes and all these things for 20, 30, 40 years, who have had and lived their best life. They've retired and they thought, I want to stretch my mental, my physical attributes. I want to do some more heavy lifting. And they've gone off and in some cases got a degree. And I know lots of people that have done that and then returned to the working world in whatever guise they want to. And I think there's huge benefit, not only to them as an individual and to the business, but going back to our earlier question where Matt talked about a human connection, and Jane, Emma talked about having those conversations and training in those career pathways. This generation is key to inspiring our 18 to 24-year-olds, our millennials who need a little bit of mentoring, and then you've got the reverse mentoring piece of it. The actual younger generation are great at showing some digital skill or some technical skill to these returners. So it's absolute huge opportunity and absolute no-brainer. But I think it's new? I don't necessarily think it's new in terms of, I think it's happening. I think we need to enable it more to bridge the gap out of the early adopters, if you like, so it becomes the norm that you don't have to choose a certain second career. You can choose from a vast array of that, whether it be working in retail or whether that be as a part-time quantity surveyor. Whatever your second career can be, I think it's on business, not just HR. It's on business to promote that more widely into the economy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think there is a change of mindset that's going to need to happen, because if you look back at the facts again, and we know this is a big issue, I cannot see how the age cannot increase. Look at the cost to the economy at the moment. I think they reckon it's something like it takes up nearly 60% of the entire welfare bill. And people, to Matt's point, we're healthy, we're living longer, we've still got the energy, vast buckets of experience, which could be shared and distributed through mentoring, through coaching, through just being around the next generation who are not through osmosis, who are not learning the skills that our generation might have learnt because we have a different way of working now, because of social media. And those are the skills, the core skills that all employers want, the kind of softer skills around communication, negotiation, creativity. Those things are lacking. And actually, we have 4 generations. And I think that is quite unique now. We have 4 generations working in the workplace now at the same time. We can embrace that. What I do think, though, is that the older generation might have slightly different needs from the younger generation. It can be a time when health becomes an issue. Chronic conditions might start to appear. That's very expensive for organisations. So it may well be that there's a sort of, rather like we have with the education system, we have a long process of learning to get us ready for the world of work. Maybe we should have a nice long ramp down towards a different way of working for the older generation, rather like lifestyling within the pension system, where the pension provider will start to change the profile of your pension to de-risk it for you. Maybe we should have the same approach to retirement, whatever that word means these days. And I think that's very possible, but it does require a change of mindset from employers. There is an inbuilt ageism, I think, with employers. They don't like to hire people beyond the age of 57. They perceive that as being problematic. And maybe we should, rather than keep fighting that, which I'm not saying we shouldn't, but there is an acceptance to that, but maybe it's a different way of working. A lot of people who do stop working will reskill, but they might also decide they want to use their expertise in terms of consultancy or that. It's a great idea, but that in its own right means you're running your own business. So maybe the kind of skills we should be talking about is, well, what does that mean? Well, how do you develop business? How do you develop business when you don't have any staff? What does that look like? What's it mean to run a set of accounts? these are all, again, business skills that maybe the employers and we as HR leaders could start to have those conversations with people and say, let's talk about 10 years out. What does life look like for you? What do you need to get there? What's your vision for that? What's your vision for the sort of third age?
So for people professionals, do we think it's the role is removing barriers and implementing that kind of learning mindset and skills growth mindset, regardless of age, background, stage in career? That's where the real opportunity is.
Correct. And I think we'll always be, regardless of age, we'll always want people who have a learning mindset, a growth mindset, are curious, are willing to take on new challenges. Those are the kind of people that make great employees, if you think about it. And I don't think age has a limit on those at all.
The idea that as you get older, you're less willing to learn.
Yes.
Show me the evidence.
Yeah,
Right? Do not believe it. And it is not my experience of the last nearly 30 years in the workplace. And I think actually quite the opposite. But I think at all ages, there is a understanding that with all the changes that are coming, you have to keep developing new skills. You have to keep learning. And actually, that's the best way for you to get the most out of the workplace and to be confident about a lasting career. I think people are pretty sensible around that. So we need to attend to that and provide the means by which they can do that learning and the space for them to do that learning and the culture in the organisation to do that. But you summarised it very well, I think.
Thank you. Our final point we were going to discuss is the idea that are employers missing a fundamental growth opportunity by not investing enough in green skills? So the Global Tipping Points report, led by the University of Exeter, recently suggested we've hit the planet's first catastrophic climate tipping point, while leading economist Nicholas Stern suggested that climate investment is the only growth opportunity of the 21st century. The CIPD's own report, Lifelong Learning in the Reskilling Era, highlights that investment in green skills is critical. So do we think that, given our conversation around skills and learning, there's enough investment and focus on this area? And what can employers start to do we think?
A couple of points from me. I think the first point for me, I've written big red, right, and underlined it and put exclamation marks. We look at this as almost a separate issue. We look at climate as a separate issue. We look at the green economy. We look at all of these buzzwords. It is the economy, and it is here right now. I would love somebody to tell me otherwise, because this is very much something that impacts cost of living, that impacts wage growth. It also impacts the very planet that we live on and everyday life. I think this change, this revolution isn't new. My nephews, whilst they were growing up, always asked me, "Oh, I hate history. Why do we have to study history?" One's gone on to be an electrician and one is studying to be a teacher. So they're not very history buff people, but history dictates and history tells us that we are in this revolution area of change. And we can just look back to the Industrial Revolution and how that has changed to really understand, actually, this is not green climate. This is us doing the right thing. Our job as business leaders is to think about that holistically all together, whether we do decarbonisation in one, and then are we offsetting that against something else? What does all that look like? I think the academic research is absolutely bang on. And what you will find is academia in itself are far ahead, in my opinion, of business. Students are far ahead of where we are in business. If you look at some of the traditional courses, certainly in my sector where we talk about electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, they have really transformed into a building service and environment degree. So yes, of course, the traditional courses are still there, but you're talking 30s in some of the country's top universities. 30 people or 30 students going forward for these honours degrees and Bachelor of Science degrees. Whereas building, service and environment, you're talking 3 figures in one university. So academia is way ahead of ourselves here. And I think we as businesses and the economy will benefit from that, just not right now. Mm-hmm. I suppose what we need to do comes back to those working practices. Does that need to happen? Because of and I come from building services business, where we have quite a considerable impact on the economy. So we're looking at things like, well, does that actually need to be traditional carbon? Can that be hydrogen? Can that be solar? Can that be different in the future building? Smart buildings are astronomically popular. Every building we're sat in London, most of the construction in London is now a smart building. So how do we get the skills to service that? How do we keep making sure that the carbon footprints of these buildings are low? That's our challenge, not necessarily having a spotlight just on something because it's climate. It's really articulating it in the fact that it's a key commercial driver and it's not going to go away anytime soon. It's here right now. And I'll get off my soapbox now.
But I can certainly back that up. So I really agree, Rob. I think the commercial element of this, it is here. It's been here for a number of years. I think the public discourse on it changes how we might all perceive it. Mm-hmm. And so we know that the President of the United States said just recently that climate change was the greatest con job, quote. And that is going to affect the way people think about it. And we do know there are different views. There are different views in the UK. I even looked this up. So 57% of the public believe climate is an important issue at the moment. And it's interesting, again, it oscillates quite a bit. So over the last year, it's gone 53 to 69%. Mm-hmm. So we know public opinion will change on a topic like this. But my point would be that's the vast majority of the population who believe this is an important issue. And so you're not in a marginal situation then. That does mean it's commercial. Mm-hmm. And certainly, even when I think about ourselves as a financial services provider, you know, as a big employer, we have responsibilities around environment to our shareholders, our regulator. There are formal expectations from us that we need to serve around that. That requires people with the skills to do it. We're there for a number of years in that regard. There's the whole approach around ESG that I think will ebb and flow. Actually, it kind of had a peak and it's finding a sort of more sure footing now. That's not maybe quite where it was. I think that's okay. I think organisations being called to account around their broader responsibilities is hugely healthy. But finally, then when I look at us, you know, we see the commercial opportunity, Rob, and that's great. But it means, therefore, that people need to adapt in the organisation to meet that need. And so just a couple of examples on it. We've got an online product that supports small businesses in thinking about their ESG approach, and it's called a business coach. If I'm honest, we wouldn't do that unless the need was there. So to Rob's point, we wouldn't do it because we think ethically it's the right thing. I like to think we might, maybe we would, but I do know the reason that we've done it is because there is a customer need there for us in small businesses and medium-sized businesses. And in Ireland as well, we've got a product called an EcoSaver mortgage. So basically, as you improve the energy efficiency of your home, the rate declines. Not available in the UK at this time, Rob, but in Ireland. So that shows that the commercial opportunity is there. That means that product developers have to become aware of the environmental issues and how to find solutions for them for customers. The customer need is there, commercial opportunity is there, and therefore, as organisations, we need to respond.
I find this conversation particularly encouraging because it suggests that that society and businesses are shifting from a kind of virtue signalling approach to really understanding the opportunity. And from what you're saying, Rob, about the universities and academia really being ahead of the game here, because there is a bit of a gap between, there is a supply and demand issue here in between the number of roles that are beginning to emerge and the number of people there available to fill them. But what supercharges is investment, and it's worrying, therefore, that certainly if the President of the United States says something that has an impact. I think sustainable funds saw a net outflow of capital in the first quarter of this year of 8.6 billion. Now that's worrying. Now, obviously that can be reversed, but we need society needs and makes our jobs as HR leaders much better if there are companies that are investing or being invested in, which can help the growth, can help create the jobs for all these individuals coming out of university who've now been trained in order to really capitalize on that opportunity. I have to say I have struggled as an HR leader in this area of what impact can we have. But I think you've kind of nailed it, actually, Matt, in terms of, we need, and Rob, in terms of we've got to identify the opportunity and persuade our organisations of the opportunity and go from there. And
just a question for both of you from how I process what you've talked about in this virtual signalling, and only 57% of the population believe that this is important. Is that virtual signalling, things like the Paris Agreement, that's all very political, how this has been built up to be a climate matter rather than an economic matter? Has that framing negatively impacted on people's understanding or how much they care about? Because I see it very much as a business piece, as a piece that's going to help us stay ahead. How do we impact that positively? And is it the virtual signalling and the president in his hyperbole impacting people's perception of that?
We need to ask ourselves, where are people putting their money? And it's, even in our own government, it's costing too much. I think Ed Miliband was asked to move departments and he refused. But that's proving a problem because it's costing too much. And we've got to get from that point where it's costing too much to people wanting to invest. Everyone's asked when it comes to their pension, do you want to invest in green funds? That's a kind of a critical question to answer, isn't it? Do I? And the moment those green funds offer a really great rate of return, everyone will start to pile into that. And that's what will boost everything else.
I see the 57%, and it oscillates anyway, but that's the majority of the population. So it's an important issue, which is a relatively high bar. And so if you ask the question differently, you might get a higher answer. I'm a terrible one for rounding up. I read it as 2/3. It's nearly 2/3, okay, because I'd like it to be. It's always going to be affected by the interests of various stakeholders, this whole debate, and therefore we've seen it already. We've seen it come and go. We understand some people have questions, and I think they should be listened to, either side of the argument. But at the core of this, I think when you pose the question, is absolutely there is a customer need there, and if there is a customer need, organisations will respond, and it neutralises, frankly, a lot of the politics that come around it. It's slightly detached from that in a way then. And I think, the whole thing in the end personally will come together, and this is going to be a thing that future generations are going to be extremely interested in and care about. We kind of know that already from an analytical perspective. But they become real when organisations see ways to solve need that sustains them as an organisation. I see that happening, and I know that's happening in my organisation as a bank today.
Right, I think we could talk for much longer, but... Thank you all so much. I think it's been a really great discussion. That's all from us today. I'd like to thank our guests, Jane Emma Peerless, Rob Rees and Matt Elliott, for sharing your thoughts, and as ever to you, our listeners, for listening today. Remember, we publish new episodes of the HR People Pod every fortnight, so make sure to subscribe wherever you listen and catch up on anything you've missed on demand. I'm Holly Ivins, and this has been the HR People Pod.